Why do they do this, Jobel? Why? Why are we the monsters in their story? She wept that night, bitter tears for strangers she'd never met. Rage and helplessness tangled within her until they choked her. Jobel only held her, his steady presence grounding her. He whispered softly, "You're not powerless, Elira. You just need time. Time and truth." All her life, she had believed her veil brought silence instead of screams, tolerance instead of revulsion. But if nearly dying had taught her anything, it was that hiding brought her nothing. Not acceptance, not loyalty, not safety. She would never hide her face again. Let them see her and tremble. Let them remember what they tried to destroy and what refused to stay buried. Makore. That serpent. He was not just complicit, he was orchestrating. And if he was part of this, then Lord Wuba certainly was. That man never breathed without Makore's signal. She had already put shadow walkers, men not tied to the palace, on them. They were to track their movements and report back to her. "I am not my sister," Celine cut in coldly. Tavora's voice didn't falter. "Still, Your Highness, alliances take years to build. To rule is not to cling to the preferences of the dead," Celine snapped. "It's to act in the best interest of the living. And how did you know she's dead?" Tavora clapped back, tone almost defiant. The room stilled. Celine's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. Tavora was laying traps for her, but she wouldn't fall, she wouldn't break. She let the silence stretch before she said, "Open up! By order of the governor, all herbalist homes are to be searched thoroughly this time!" Old Malu stiffened, his hands dusted with crushed herbs. His son's eyes widened with dread. The soldier strode forward and shoved his blade an inch from Jobel's neck. "Name, now." Jobel didn't flinch, but his silence deepened. "Jojan," Old Malu's son blurted. "His name is Jojan." All heads turned to him. He is my father's new apprentice." The room smelled of crushed roots and damp linen. Pale morning light slipped in through narrow wooden slats, casting thin bars of warmth over the still form on the bed. Elira lay motionless. Her robe had been stripped away, replaced with clean linen. Her face, usually hidden behind a veil, was pale and peaceful in slumber. Her bandaged head rested gently against a pillow. The thick dressing around her midsection rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. A salve-glossed sheen clung to her skin, evidence of long nights of fever and careful tending. Beside her, Jobel sat unmoving, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, fingers white from the pressure. His mind kept replaying the cliff moment over and over again. The sword, the blood, her falling. He'd jumped without thinking, and even now, some part of him still hadn't landed. His eyes, hollow from sleepless nights, watched Elira's face as though the act alone could will her eye open. He hadn't slept more than a few hours at a time in weeks, not since the night they were saved from the river's grip. That night, the herbalist, Old Malu, as the village called him, had gone to his hidden grove by the riverbank to harvest moonflowers, a rare bloom with great healing properties. That was when he stumbled upon them. Jobel, unconscious but breathing. Elira, limp and pale, clinging to a thread of life. Her veil was gone, revealing the face Old Malu had only heard of in whispers. "The Cyclops Princess," he muttered in stunned dread, his eyes fixed on her face, blood soaking through her side. He could have left them, should have. They brought danger, he knew that. But as the moonlight hit Jobel's mud-smeared, unconscious form and the girl's limp hand twitched weakly, he found himself kneeling beside them instead. With quiet urgency, he'd shaken Jobel awake. Jobel had jolted upright, one arm instinctively thrown over Elira's body. That alone had told Malu what kind of man he was. "If you can walk, boy, carry her." They had moved under darkness, careful not to be seen. Malu's small home stood at the edge of the village, backed by thick woods. His wife and his teenage son had said nothing, only cleared a room and helped prepare the poultices. "She'll wake," Malu had told Jobel. "The head wound will keep her under. She hit something hard, stone, likely, but her pulse is strong." Jobel waited. For 3 weeks he had been by her side, feeding her broth drop by drop when her lips parted. He wiped her forehead through nights of fever, held her hand when she trembled in her sleep, whispered her name in moments of stillness, as though it might bring her back. Now, seated beside her, Jobel reached out and brushed a lock of hair from Elira's brow. "You're stronger than all of them," he murmured softly. "Don't let them win. Not like this." Behind him, the wooden door creaked open. Old Malu entered, carrying a small bowl of broth. His hands were stained with green and brown from constant grinding and poulticing. His expression was always serious, but not unkind. "She's stable," he said softly. "The swelling's gone down. That head wound, it took more from her than the stomach did." "When will she wake?" The man stirred the broth slowly, then glanced over at the unconscious princess. "When her spirit is ready. The body is healing, but the soul takes its own path back." Jobel nodded, jaw clenched. "The river nearly took her, boy, and your arm—" He glanced at the bruised shoulder Jobel kept bandaged. "You're no ghost either." "I'll be fine when she wakes up." The herbalist hummed in understanding. A minute passed, then he sighed. "You should know. The governor's soldiers are back. More of them." At dawn the day after the assassination, the governor's soldiers swarmed the village, searching. They didn't say what for exactly, just that they were looking for a dangerous woman. They were rough, impatient, and thorough. They raided homes, inns, temples, pulled people from their beds. They inspected every face, every scar, every eye. No one's allowed to travel. No wagons leave without inspection. 2 days into the search, they had come to Malu's home. Jobel and Elira had been hidden in the loft, a secret space under the roof of old Malu's house, its entrance masked by dangling bundles of herbs and dried roots. Elira unconscious still, her breath shallow and warm against Jobel's collarbone as he held her close, silent. The soldiers had searched below. Malu's son had stared them in the eyes and told them no one was inside. The wife had stirred a pot of bitterleaf stew, her voice calm and easy. The soldiers left after 15 minutes, but Jobel hadn't relaxed. Not since, not once. Old Malu looked at Jobel, eyes sharp. "The soldiers are getting smarter, more thorough with their search. I need to find a way to take her and leave." "I'm not saying you should leave, boy. We need to be very careful and alert." He tilted his head, a small smile on his face. "If you were to leave, you won't get far with her like this." Jobel exhaled slowly, eyes falling back on Elira. Her chest rose, then fell again. Barely. "I won't let them take her," he said quietly. The old man said nothing more, only patted Jobel's shoulder and left the bowl on the table. As the door closed, Jobel sighed, lowering his head. "Come back to me," he whispered. "You have to." Outside, distant voices rose, the clang of armor, a soldier shouting commands, footsteps echoing through the village streets like approaching thunder. Danger was closing in. And still Elira slept, on the edge of waking, in a house full of secrets, in a world that wished she was truly dead. Back in the palace, the throne room felt warm, too comfortable for most of the councillors seated in attendance. With the new leadership, laws were bending in their favor. decisions now leaning their way. The old restraints of the late king and Elira's moral caution had vanished. But to a quiet, watchful few, the throne room had never felt colder. Its gilded walls and painted ceilings remained untouched, but something in the air had shifted, something heavy and oppressive, like a velvet curtain drawn over a once vibrant stage. Gone was the quiet nobility that had filled the space during the king's reign. In its place, there now sat a different rhythm, one dictated not by duty, but by ambition. Selene sat upon her seat, draped in a flowing obsidian gown, her circlet of regency resting lightly upon her brow. Before her, a royal decree lay spread across a carved table. The decree would impose a doubled tariff on all goods imported from the kingdom of Rashira, a neighboring kingdom and a key trade ally. Her eyes scanned it, quill poised about to sign. Lady Tavora, keeper of records and royal decrees, stood quickly, her spine stiff with visible disapproval. She cleared her throat and addressed the throne with tempered grace. "Your Highness, forgive me for the interruption, but I must caution against this tariff decree. This same decree was reviewed and rejected last season by the late king. Increasing this tariff, especially now, will endanger our already fragile alliance with Rashira." Princess Elira understood this, which was why she had firmly rejected this very decree weeks before her ill-fated journey to Darai. "I am not my sister," Selene cut in coldly. Tavora's voice didn't falter. "Still, Your Highness, alliances take years to build. To rule is not to cling to the preferences of the dead," Selene snapped. "It's to act in the best interest of the living. And how did you know she's dead?" Tavora clapped back, tone almost defiant. The room stilled. Selene's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. Tavora was laying traps for her, but she wouldn't fall, she wouldn't break. She let the silence stretch before she said, "To be a good ruler, Lady Tavora, sentiment must die. We cannot keep coddling weak alliances for the sake of appearances. Rashira has gained more from our kindness than we from theirs." Her tone was sharp as glass. Let them learn respect. Tavora said nothing more, but the subtle downturn of her mouth betrayed her thoughts. She bowed her head reluctantly and returned to her seat. Then Selene dipped the quill and, with practiced ease, signed the parchment with a single stroke. Stamp, seal. It was done. "Effective immediately," she declared, her voice ringing through the chamber. A flicker of satisfaction crossed the face of Lord Wuba, Minister of Taxation, seated within the council. He leaned back, his fingers steepled together in quiet glee. The ink on the decree was still wet, but already his mind was moving, calculating the profits. Lord Marcoret remained impassive, but behind his cold expression his eyes gleamed. The decree would drive independent traders straight into their hands. Favors would be bought, exemptions would be sold. Every law Selene had passed was another brick in the fortress of power they were building. The effects of Selene's rule had begun to unfurl like smoke across Eldora. Her reign had begun, and it was not kind. She signed decrees with practiced ease. Taxes doubled. Not for the nobles. They were granted generous exemptions under economic stimulation policies. But for the common folk, farmers paid in grain, artisans in coin, and merchants in both. Peasants who couldn't meet new levies were dragged from their homes. Shopkeepers who dared speak against the changes met terrible fates. Discontent festered in the streets like mold behind gilded walls. Then new decrees came, silencing street gatherings, banned protests, and redefined sedition in vague, dangerous terms. Those who spoke too loudly against the throne were choked with gold, or they suddenly vanished, whichever was more convenient. For every frown Selene earned from the people, she earned more within the council. The nobles, those bloated with greed and ambition, began to flock to her side. She rewarded loyalty not with titles, but with opportunity and influence. She was building allegiance. She sought power, not praise. And she was securing it, one cruel law at a time. But behind every decision, behind every law, sat the queen. She never appeared in court. She didn't need to. Her web was spun through quiet whispers and cold smiles, always a step behind the curtain. Lord Woober handled the coin. With Lord Macaray on her side, she arranged for troublesome councillors to be quietly stripped of their seats. Together with Celine, they orchestrated a slow purge of councillors who opposed her daughter. Lord Akena, voice of the border provinces, was removed for health reasons after opposing the new tax decree. Lady Hura, once a powerful voice within the council, was silenced under accusations of corruption. Even officials not in the state council were not safe. 2 military captains close to Senavi were dismissed, one for insubordination, the other for seditious language. Each seat filled with someone more compliant. Each voice of conscience replaced by a voice of coin. But not all had bowed. Commander Senavi remained, silent, coiled like a drawn blade. She hadn't spoken much in council since the day Celine's regency was declared. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was defiance enough. Just as Elira had told her, she observed, recorded, and watched. She enforced only the laws that were valid. She had refused to arrest protesters unless due process was followed. She refused to deploy her elite guard unless proper writs were shown, and when those writs came falsified, she exposed them in front of the court. She blocked unlawful detainments, citing royal protocol. It was all she could do, and every time she crossed Celine's will with law, Celine's eye twitched, but her tongue held. Senavi was too public, too beloved, too dangerous to cross. Yet, Lady Tavora, too, remained a thorn. Her record books and decrees gave her subtle power and protected many. By knowing what was legal, she could block what was not. She could delay, reinterpret, even stall policies under legal precedent. She wielded ink like a dagger. And finally, High Minister Ijara, the stone of the judicial order. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were law, and his silence made Celine sweat. And though he had not declared for Elira, he had never once addressed Celine as Crown Princess, only Regent. Celine had the throne, but not the full court. Not yet. Only one thing stood between her and the crown. Time. It is the 2nd month since Elira's disappearance, and nothing has been heard. If the 6-month interval elapses, she would be crowned, unless Elira returns. But to many, she was already a ghost, and that was exactly how they wanted her to stay. The room was quiet. The late afternoon light filtered in through the window. Jobel sat beside Elira, unmoving. His hands cradled hers, his thumbs gently brushing over her knuckles, as if the motion might somehow anchor her back to him. Her skin was pale but warm beneath his calloused fingers. She lay so still on the bed, her breathing soft and even. He hadn't left her side, not in the days when her fever raged, not when her breath turned shallow, not when he thought he might lose her. She looked peaceful in sleep, but he knew better. Peace had cost her blood. He sighed, exhausted, but never giving up. "Come back," he whispered. "Please." And then, as if his voice had tugged her from the depths, her fingers shifted beneath his palms. She stirred. Just the faintest twitch at first, like the flutter of a dream flickering across her lashes. Jobel sat up straighter, leaning forward, his breath caught in his throat. "Elira?" he whispered, afraid to believe. Her brow furrowed faintly, her eyelid fluttered, struggled, and then slowly she opened her eye. It was cloudy at first, unfocused, as if the world was too heavy to bear. She blinked. Once, twice. Elira, he said again, voice choked with emotion. It's me. You're awake. She turned her head slightly, her gaze slowly adjusting to the soft light, to the shape of his face. Jobel? She rasped, the word barely audible. Relief broke over him like a tide. He laughed softly, not trusting his voice for anything else. You're safe, he whispered finally, cupping the side of her face tenderly. You're safe now. As though summoned by the tremor of returning life, the wooden door creaked open and old Malu stepped into the room. He carried no herbs this time, no bowls of bitter-smelling salves, only a quiet reverence in his weathered eyes. He dipped his head with a respectful bow. You're finally awake, princess, he said, voice rough as bark but full of warmth. You had us all worried. Elira blinked again, her gaze dragging from Malu to Jobel. She tried to sit, but pain bloomed sharply at her side and forced a gasp through her lips. Easy, love, Jobel murmured, gently easing her back down. Don't move too fast. Where am I? She murmured softly. Jobel exhaled, glancing at Malu for a moment before answering. We are in Darai. You were hurt. Badly. Fell into the river. The current carried us. We were found by the riverbank. The herbalist, old Malu, he brought us here. Your wounds were deep, but your will to live was deeper. You're lucky to be alive, old Malu told her while settling down into one of the chairs with a quiet grace. Elira looked between them, the memory of rushing water and pain flashing behind her eyes. The river, the ambush. She remembered it all. How long was I out? She asked finally. 6 weeks, old Malu answered before Jobel could. The palace, what about the kingdom? She asked worriedly. Jobel looked away, a shadow passing over his face. A lot has changed. Celine has taken your place. She sits in council now. They think you're dead. Elira's eyes narrowed. A long breath escaped her. Then, quiet but steady, she said, Not yet. Malu gave a faint chuckle of approval under his breath. Jobel looked back at her, a half-smile tugging at his lips. No, he said, his voice low. Not yet. We're not done. But you need to heal first. Elira closed her eyes briefly, the weight of his words sinking in. She was alive, hidden, broken, but not beaten. The candle burned low on Commander Sanavi's desk, its flame casting flickering shadows across the stacks of reports that cluttered the surface. She sat unmoving behind her desk, her face half-bathed in the soft amber glow. Her eyes were sharp, bloodshot with lack of sleep, and locked on yet another report she had already read 3 times. And still, nothing. She exhaled through her nose, tight-lipped, her fingers drumming against the polished wood with mounting frustration. There were no gaps, no overlooked detail, no loose threads to pull. Everything had been meticulously covered, too meticulously. It reeked of orchestration, that conniving witch of a queen. She thought bitterly. She pushed the report aside and leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly. She didn't need written proof to know who was behind it. The Queen, Celine. And now, without doubt, Lord Makore. She had suspected the Queen and her ambitious little daughter from the beginning, but it wasn't until Makore's carefully delivered speech at Celine's coronation as regent that her suspicions expanded and deepened. The chief counselor stepped forward, voice sonorous and full of reverence as he declared the council's support. And by this law, in this time of grief and uncertainty, with the throne left empty by the passing of His Majesty the King, and in the prolonged absence of Princess Elira, whose fate remains unknown, we, the Royal Council, in wisdom and duty to the kingdom, do hereby instate Princess Selene as Regent Crown Princess. May she rule with clarity and resolve, until such a time as Providence restores certainty to the royal line. That speech. That damn speech! She had returned to her office that day and sat in silence, replaying each word. Then, line by line, she picked it apart. In the prolonged absence, a subtle framing of Elira's disappearance as abandonment, whose fate remains unknown. A phrase meant to plant doubt without claiming responsibility. Not dead, but as good as. In wisdom and duty. A line soaked in sanctimony, justifying their power grab, their betrayal, as if it were an act of patriotism, regicide wrapped in honor. Until such a time as Providence restores certainty. A coward's evasion. A poison-tipped clause that avoided denying Elira's legitimacy, while quietly reinforcing that the kingdom must move on without her. Her jaw clenched as she leaned forward again, gripping the armrests tightly. Makore. That serpent. He was not just complicit, he was orchestrating. And if he was part of this, then Lord Wuba certainly was. That man never breathed without Makore's signal. She had already put shadow walkers, men not tied to the palace, on them. They were to track their movements and report back to her. But nothing had come back yet. It's either these snakes moved with care, or someone was cleaning up loose ends faster than she could track. Her gaze turned to the corner of the room, where Elira had stood the last time she was in her office. And her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the moment in the forest when she had spared the maid's life. Where others would have acted with blood and fear, Elira had chosen compassion, had shown mercy in the face of betrayal. That was when she knew that Elira was what their kingdom needed, what the people needed. And now she was gone, vanished, as if swallowed by the very trees of Darai. Her brows furrowed deeper. Even Jobel disappeared. No one else knew a soldier had gone missing with Elira but Sanavi. Jobel's recruitment was deliberately quiet. Only Sanavi, Elira, and Rezu knew. His name wasn't in the official roster of guards assigned to Darai. He had joined the escort the very morning they rode out, a stranger to the other guards, and now they were all dead. The assassins had been thorough. No witnesses, no survivors but Elira, if she lived. Jobel too, perhaps. He was trained well, quiet, perceptive, loyal. She leaned back slowly, a long breath escaping her chest. Her office was silent, save for the soft crackle of the candle. In the quiet, her shoulders dropped slightly. She closed her eyes, allowing herself one moment of weariness. "Be alive," she whispered into the stillness. "You both have to be." She let the words hang there, a silent prayer to whatever entity still watched. Then, with a sigh, she reached for another report. The work had to continue, until she found something, anything. It had been a week since Elira opened her eye to the living world again, and though her body still ached from her injuries, she now had strength enough to move about the small room. She often found herself drawn to the narrow wooden window slats. She would stand behind them in silence, observing and learning more. Through the slats, she watched soldiers, at least a dozen of them, moved down the dirt road with tense urgency, eyes sharp, hands never far from their hilts. They moved not as protectors, their boots stirring the soil like vultures circling a fresh grave. According to what Jobel had told her, along with the whispered conversations she overheard between the herbalist's son and his parents, it became clear that the patrols weren't friendly. These weren't men loyal to her father, nor to her. She had seen them stop villagers and question them. They were searching for her. Elira had pieced together the truth. She had been deliberately lured to Darai, played like a pawn, drawn from the safety of the palace, so that she could be eliminated in a place too far for help to reach easily, too far from Sanavi's protection. And now that she had slipped through their fingers, they were desperately turning every home upside down, kicking down doors, interrogating families, hoping she was dead or to find her and finish what they'd started. They would show her no mercy if they found her alive. Elira drew back from the window slightly, her breath controlled, her face thoughtful. Her veil was gone, abandoned with the fear that once ruled her. All her life, she had believed her veil brought silence instead of screams, tolerance instead of revulsion. But if nearly dying had taught her anything, it was that hiding brought her nothing. Not acceptance, not loyalty, not safety. She would never hide her face again. Let them see her and tremble. Let them remember what they tried to destroy and what refused to stay buried. A soft murmur drifted from the next room. The herbalist's wife again. Ever since Elira had awakened, the truth about the kingdom's suffering had crept in like smoke under the door. Though no one said it directly to her, she'd heard the herbalist's wife muttering in hushed tones, bitter and afraid, of taxes that kept doubling, tightening like a noose around the villagers' necks, of tax collectors who had turned into wolves in human skin. They demand livestock, grain, and whatever coin could be found, regardless of the desperation in people's eyes. They now take even from the sick and the old. How cruel could Celine be? Elira wondered with a cold, bitter fury curling in her chest. These people were barely surviving, and yet they were being crushed further, branded criminals for wanting to eat. "Penny for your thoughts?" came Jobel's voice from behind. His tone was light, but his eyes were watchful, always observing her moods. He had a gift for it, reeling her back in when her thoughts turned dark. The herbalist had warned her not to overexert, physically or mentally, and Jobel had taken it upon himself to guard her peace with quiet, unwavering dedication. She looked at him, smiling faintly, but before she could answer, a loud commotion erupted from outside. Elira's eye darted back to the window. She crouched low and peered through the slats. Instantly, her body went rigid at the scene unfolding. A boy, no older than 16, was being dragged from a nearby hut. She recognized the home, the widow who lived beside the herbalist's family. The boy was her only child. Two armed tax enforcers yanked him forward while the woman cried and clung to his arm. Her cries fell on deaf ears. "Please, give me more time. He's all I have. Please!" The boy twisted, reaching for his mother, his voice cracking as he begged not to be taken. "I'll work. I'll pay. Just, please, don't make her suffer alone." Elira's stomach twisted. She couldn't look away. Her hands curled into fists, knuckles white. The scene etched into her soul. The mother's grief, the boy's terror. She had heard the stories. But this was different. Watching it unfold, watching a family ripped apart for a tax they couldn't afford, for a crime they never committed, it cracked something inside her. "Elira," Jobel said gently, sensing her trembling. She didn't answer. "Elira," he said again, firmer this time, placing a hand on her shoulder. Her muscles tensed beneath his palm. "Don't," he said softly. "Not yet. I know what you're thinking. But if they see you..." His voice was calm, but urgent. His touch firm but tender. Slowly, carefully, he guided her away from the window, away from the rage that flared in her chest like fire meeting dry grass. Her feet resisted for a moment, but then yielded. He led her back to the bed, and she sank into the mattress as if her weight was too much to bear. And then, without warning, the tears came. Hot, silent, uncontrollable. She buried her face into Jobel's shoulder, her frame shaking with grief. Not just for the boy, but for everything. Her helplessness, her betrayal, the kingdom she couldn't yet save, for the life that had been taken from her before she could even claim it. "I hate feeling this helpless," she choked out. Jobel held her close, one hand stroking her hair, the other wrapped protectively around her back. He didn't speak right away. He let her cry, let her release what she couldn't control. When her sobs began to slow, he whispered, "You won't feel like this forever. You'll make it right. Not today, but soon. You're still here, Elira, and that means hope still lives. You'll rise again, and when you do, they'll answer for every tear you've shed." She gripped the edge of his tunic, drawing strength from his words. And in that quiet moment, wrapped in grief, in comfort, in fire held back by patience, Elira knew she wouldn't stay hidden forever. The pounding came at dawn. Fists like war drums slammed against the wooden door of old Malu's hut. Voices barked from outside, hoarse, urgent. "Open up! By order of the governor, all herbalist homes are to be searched thoroughly this time!" Old Malu stiffened, his hands dusted with crushed herbs. His son's eyes widened with dread. "They're back," his son whispered. Malu stepped outside, his voice steady but firm. "You've already searched our home 2 days ago. You found nothing. You'll find nothing again." The lead guard sneered, unimpressed. "Then you've nothing to fear. Step aside." Inside, just beyond the noise, Elira and Jobel sprang into motion. "Elira, now!" Jobel whispered, gripping her arm and leading her, as fast as her healing body could manage, toward the hidden ladder tucked behind a heavy draped wall. Above them, the secret loft yawned open. "Go," he whispered again. Outside, voices rose. "We have patients to tend to," Malu barked. "Children, sick villagers. You're wasting our time, and yours." But the guards shoved past him, brushing aside his words like flies. Inside, Elira grasped the rungs and climbed. Her wounds screamed in protest, but adrenaline sharpened every of her movement. She slipped into the loft and turned, her hand reaching down for Jobel, signaling him to come, quickly. But he hesitated, eyes darting toward their room door as the guards' footsteps thundered toward them. There wasn't enough time. If he followed her, the movement would draw attention. If they caught them both, it was over. But if only he was seen. He shook his head. "No," he mouthed. He gave her hand one last squeeze, then pushed the ladder up, sealing the loft entrance. Quickly he yanked down a net of herbs and roots to cover the loft entrance. Elira's panicked eyes stared through the slits between leaves. Then, bang! The door crashed open. 3 guards stormed in, blades drawn. Jobel stood in the center of the room, arms slightly raised, calm but silent. Old Malu and his family stormed in behind the guards, hearts pounding, but faces blank. "Who is this?" barked the lead guard. "You hiding someone?" Jobel said nothing. The soldier strode forward and shoved his blade an inch from Jobel's neck. "Name, now." Jobel didn't flinch, but his silence deepened. "Jojan," old Malu's son blurted. "His name is Jojan." All heads turned to him. He is my father's new apprentice." The boy continued, desperately willing it to sound natural. "He is from the hill village." Old Malu snapped into the lie without missing a beat, tone gruff and convincing. "That's right. He came in 3 days ago. Wants to learn roots and smoke salves." The guards weren't buying it. The second soldier stepped toward Jobel. "Why didn't he speak then?" "He has a condition," Malu answered, selling off the lie further. "He's not right in the head sometimes. He goes blank when startled. You point steel at him, he'll freeze like a goat. It's like his mind shuts off and he can't speak. Please, he is harmless. Lower your swords and don't make it worse for him." There was a pause. Then, reluctantly, the guards lowered their weapons. One of them spat to the side. "Useless waste of time." The leader studied Jobel for a heartbeat, then said, "Strange time to take in apprentices, old Malu." "Aye, but illness doesn't ask for the right time, Captain." Malu replied curtly. "If you're done sniffing through every bedroll and window frame, let us be. I have herbs to prepare for patients who don't get paid to wave swords around." The guards exchanged glances, unsure. But the leader finally relented with a grunt and signaled for them to withdraw. They muttered curses as they turned away. One by one they filed out. The last soldier slammed the door shut behind him. And then, silence. Malu's sun peeked through the window slats. "They're gone," he whispered. Only then did Jobel exhale, his body unclenching like a bow released. From above, a rustle of movement. Jobel moved quickly and helped Elira down, holding her steady as she reached the floor, then guided her to the bed. Her face was pale, drawn tight with worry. "They saw you," she whispered. "You were right there. Why didn't they recognize you?" Jobel crouched beside her, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Because to them, I don't exist," he said. She blinked. "What?" He looked away, thinking back. "The day we left for Darai, that was my first day in uniform. I was never officially enlisted. The only people who knew I had been recruited were you, Rezu, and Sanavi." He lowered his voice, looking toward the window, as if seeing through time. "The soldiers who died in the ambush, none of them knew me. I hadn't trained with them. I wasn't on any roster. No one ever announced me. I wasn't even part of the palace guard. Just a ghost Sanavi pulled from nowhere." Malu, arms folded, listened in thoughtful silence. Elira's brows drew tight. "But what about the assassin?" "I killed him before I jumped," Jobel said. "He never had the chance to report that anyone else survived and went after you. And now, the only version of the story that made it back to the court, to the conspirators, is that you were attacked, your body, dead or alive, disappeared, and the rest with you during the journey are dead." He met her gaze. "They don't even know I was ever there, or even here." "And now you're Jojan, an apprentice?" Elira asked, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Jobel chuckled and glanced at the boy. "All thanks to him for thinking fast." The boy flushed but smiled, proud. "I just said the first name that came to mind. Funny thing about men like those guards, they don't look too hard at nobodies." Elira smiled at the boy. "You saved us. Thank you." He dipped his head in a shy bow. "You're welcome. I'm glad I could help." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the fugitives exhaled. And for now, at least, the hunted were safe. In the weeks that followed, Jobel, now Jojan, moved through the village with the quiet skill of a shadow, learning how to blend in, how to stoop slightly when speaking to elders, how to feign a stutter when addressed too directly, and how to keep his presence forgettable. Yet nothing about this village life was forgettable. Each day brought a fresh wound to his sense of justice. He watched children with hollow eyes fighting over rotten fruits, men, even boys no older than 12, dragged into forced labor to pay off their families' tax debts, and women stripped of their dignity as they weep beside empty grain jars. The commoners were suffering, not from nature's cruelty but from man's greed. At night, he would return to the herbalist's small home where Elira waited, seated on the bed, usually staring blankly at the wall. As he relayed what he had seen, her reactions changed each time. Bitter silence one day, quiet tears another, and sometimes, more recently, simmering rage that made her fists curl into her clothes. "I should be doing something," she had whispered once, eyes hot with fury. "Not hiding like a ghost. "You're not hiding," he had said, kneeling beside her. "You're waiting, and waiting is a kind of war, too." She turned her face away, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. "Why do they do this, Jobel? Why are we the monsters in their story?" She wept that night, bitter tears for strangers she'd never met. Rage and helplessness tangled within her until they choked her. Jobel only held her, his steady presence grounding her. He whispered softly, "You're not powerless, Elira. You just need time and truth." To deepen the illusion of their new lives, Jobel often accompanied old Malu, whether to gather herbs or deliver medicine to ailing villagers. He listened, observed, and learned. One humid afternoon, while on his way to deliver a small vial of poultice to a merchant's home, Jobel found himself face to face with a pair of guards. One squinted. "Oi, isn't that old Malu's half-wit apprentice?" He jeered, stepping close. "Still got nothing in that empty skull?" The other guard chuckled. "Ah, the one that goes blank when he's scared, like a dumb goat." Before Jobel could react, the first guard drew his blade in jest and pointed it to Jobel's throat. Without missing a beat, Jobel froze and widened his eyes, lips parting slightly in a blank expression, just as they expected. His body slackened like someone struck dumb by fear. The guards burst into laughter. "Still dumb as dirt," the second guard said. "Useless bastard." "Hopeless," the first guard muttered as they walked on. "Let's go." Jobel remained still until their footsteps faded. Only then did he exhale, slow, controlled. Another day, a crowd had gathered at the edge of the village market. Jobel drifted in, watching quietly as tax collectors ripped through a merchant's stall, seizing baskets of dried fish and jars of oil. The merchant, an elderly man with a cane, shouted after them, "I begged for time. My grandson is ill. Where am I to get more coin?" No one answered. Once the collectors left, Jobel stepped forward. "What levy did they say you owed?" he asked softly. The merchant, though wary, handed over a creased parchment. Jobel unfolded it, reading carefully. His eyes caught every word, every curve of ink. But there was no seal, not a smear of wax, not a single sign of royal legitimacy, or even the provincial mark. He frowned. "Where's the royal seal?" "There hasn't been one for months," the merchant grunted. "Only the warden's mark. And we pay, or we bleed. This isn't official," he said under his breath, then folded the parchment, gave it back, and walked away slowly, his mind turning like a blade being sharpened. He had seen 3 more of those orders since then. All were different, but none bore a royal seal. No seal meant no legitimacy. No legitimacy meant someone was defrauding the villagers under the guise of law. That night, as Elira lay curled up on the bed, Jobel stood by the window, staring at the pale moon outside. The pain on her face when he recounted these stories was almost too much to bear. But she needed to know. He muttered to himself, "I need to know why those taxes bear no seal. What exactly is the village warden hiding? I will find out. Even if I have to crawl into the warden's records myself, I will find out what they've done to your people, Elira." You've just reached the end of part 3 of The Cyclops Princess, and if you're excited for the next part, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first person to know when the next part drops.